Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Living Tasawwuf, Living Islam. Today we continue with the journey into the Futuhat al-Makkiyah to the section of the secrets of the Salat from Muhyiddin ibn al-Arabi. As Sidi Sakib has explained, we have been over the last few weeks speaking about several aspects of how he starts this discourse, and then we arrive to the section which he describes as before the Salat. And he starts with the Adhan itself. It is a very lengthy, even though in number of pages it accounts to 5 or 6 pages, but given the density of the language of Ibn al-Arabi, is quite an ordeal to be able to cover every aspect of what he signifies. We started with the Takbir, in understanding what is the extent of Takbir. When we say Takbir, we just don't simply pronounce a word in Arabic, but the meaning is profound, and it changes the way in which we understand the world. Takbir, as Ibn al-Arabi explains, is a greatness without comparison. And then it explores the notion of how do we tend to understand the world around us by means of the intellect and by means of rational argument. And that capacity and that fashion of thinking, it simply does not allow you to exalt Allah in the way He deserves. So in this, he enters into a discourse about the causes, what causes what, and whether that way of thinking, which is the very nature, the very foundation of Western thinking, of philosophy, how he explains how that doesn't take us to Allah. So you cannot define Allah as He is the greatest in terms of He is the cause of all things. That perception is a simplification of something far, far greater than the cause of something, for He is indeed the one that sustains everything. It is far, far deeper than just looking at cause and effect. We looked at these last week, and today I want to focus on also one single sentence of Ibn al-Arabi, but I think is of tremendous consequence in order to continue with the rest of the text. Now, it sounds like a very simple argument, but as you will see with Ibn al-Arabi, Takbir is a whole demonstration of knowledge. The word I want to speak about is Basirah. And Basirah is, as you know, often translated as vision, the inner vision. And in the eyes of Ibn al-Arabi, this it gives it maps out, it uses it to map out the whole notion of knowledge. And this is critical to understand how do you call with Basirah or without Basirah. One thing is to understand the concept of Takbir. But to do it with Basirah, what is the meaning of doing it with Basirah? So the Shaykh Muhyiddin starts by quoting the ayat of Qur'an 12:108. 12:108, if you want to look at it, is interesting, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala indicates to Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, speak that I call to Allah with Basirah. It goes on it says a little bit more. But the key expression is to call to Allah with Basirah. And that means that calling to Allah, Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam calls to Allah with Basirah. What does it mean? Well, not surprisingly, for Ibn al-Arabi, this is a big deal. There is a difference to call upon Allah to do da'wah, but not only to call the people to enter into Islam, but also to call upon Allah is also to speak about the Sharia. Any knowledge that is derived from Ma'rifatullah, that everything that relates to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you need Basirah, with Basirah. And to call other people to Allah, it needs Basirah. So for Ibn al-Arabi, this is not a trivial sentence. It is important. It is very important. In fact, is central to understand the call of the Adhan, which is the subject matter, but also something about how do we get to know Allah, and much more important, the very act of calling other people to Adhan, which is what the Adhan is. The Adhan is a call. And if you do it, you have to do it with Basirah. So this is the plan, and this is what we want to look at today. Now, the word Basirah has several acceptions in order to come to its grasp. How do we translate it? And often the word used is vision, and some people qualify it with inner vision. So the first distinction that we make is that there is a vision that is not the vision of the physical eyes. It's a different type of vision. And it's a vision that it cuts through the sensory and it takes you closer to wherever you look, the face of Allah. It's a path. It's a path, and it's a journey, and it's seeking. And that in itself is knowledge. Perhaps a good way to start with the notion of Basirah is, first of all, the distinction. I think this is the most critical part. There is a distinction between the eye, the inner side, and the outer side. And this is from another text. Well, actually, this is for the Futuhat al-Makkiyah also. But in some other section, he says, quoting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he says, sight does not encompass him. It doesn't matter how big the sight is whether it's outward or inward, it doesn't encompass Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so from here, he continues, he says, that is, for every eye, the eyes of the faces and the eyes of the heart. So this is the first distinction. The first of the eye, of the face, is how we look at the world at the sensory level. That's easy to understand. The eye of the heart, or the inner eye, he said, for the hearts, they only see inner side, and this is Basirah. And the eyes of the face, it only sees the outward side, which is Basar. Basirah and Basar. So, two different words. Basirah, Basar. He continues, whatever perception occurs by it, then when it is in the akal, it is called Basirah. So the akal produces Basirah. And when you do it outwardly, this relates to a fikr. So here is a very important distinction. To call upon Allah with Basirah is to call upon Allah with Aql, not with intellect. And so that opens up a whole discussion about what is to give the Adhan with Aql. And it follows that what is the difference between Fikr and with Aql? How do these two things relate to one another? So I'm just cutting through several sections. Even Arabi says, among us, there are those who seek by reflection, fikr. And then there are those who have aql. In the assembly, in the seeking of knowledge of Allah, instead of the fikr, they use the aql. This is so important so far, even though we haven't entered into the matter, because I want you to notice that the word aql is all the time in modern translations translated as intellect. And then what happens with fikr? They call it reflection. But reflection and intellect is the same. There is no difference between one another. So it means that there must be some other way of knowledge that is, in the word of aql, escapes from the mind. It's not just a way of understanding that is limited and is within the domain of the sensory, including reason. And reason is to find the cause and effect of something. Remember that in the world of Ibn Arabi, reason is part of the sensory. It's just what glues things together. So this other type of thinking, known as aql, which is the key to the Adhan, needs an explanation. We have covered this topic many times before, but I have to remind you again, because without understanding of how aql gets involved and Basirah gets involved in the Adhan, the rest of the talk of Ibn Arabi becomes incomprehensible. And I will tell you what makes it completely incomprehensible is the notion that when repeatedly Ibn Arabi distinguishes between fikr and aql, the English translation makes them the same thing together. It mixes them all up together, making almost impossible to understand what Ibn Arabi is saying. A similarity to this is the discussion about time in modern language, when we are not capable of distinguishing between the time that is purely without reality, is a reference point of us being the observers, which has to do with the movement of things, the sun and the moon and the rotation, and with that we establish a time which is observable, that it doesn't have existence in itself, which is represented by the moment, the instant, and the thaman. And there is another absolute time that it has reality, because is Allah. Time is Allah. And on the basis of this distinction, we are capable of discussing the matters of the world. Now imagine that in English language, all these two all these two distinctions between existent and non-existent time is all time. It's only one word. So the mess is absolute. And there is no way of understanding what the people are saying when they start speaking about absolute and relative time, but they cannot distinguish the difference between what is observable and what is not. Furthermore, in the case of akal, of intellect, when the distinction between the knowledge of the heart and the knowledge of the brain cannot be distinguished, then what it does is that just like time becomes only relative, well, in the realm of knowledge, all the knowledge becomes sensory. So Fikr occupies the space of akal, and then the rest of the discourse of Ibn Arabi becomes incomprehensible. That is why it's so important. And that's why I want to dedicate this time to go back to something that we have discussed many times before. In this occasion, I'm going to focus on the why this thing is relevant to the Adhan. To call upon something with Basirah, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala indicates. Well, the next journey is to understand limitations. And Ibn Arabi quotes Abu Bakr as-Siddiq in one famous hadith where he says, incapacity to grasp Allah, the knowledge of Allah. So the incapacity to grasp the apprehension, he says. The word for apprehension is idrak. Idrak is to be able to grasp something comprehensively. So our incapacity to grasp comprehensively, he says, that is our comprehension. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. What does it mean? Knowledge is to know that we do not know. And then Ibn Arabi takes this statement and he says, and that is precisely the condition of the person who has akal. So the knowledge of the person of akal is exactly the opposite of the affirmative person of fikr, who has to define the things. This is like this, and this is like that, and this thing is different than this. Which is necessary. For example, you have to determine whether somebody is an assassin or not. And you have to come with an answer yes or no. You cannot just say, well, we cannot possibly understand. Your obligation is to be able to come if the evidence is naturally. Also, I don't know, it's also a possible answer. But your job is to be able to discriminate. And that's okay within the realms that the Sharia has established and within the laws Allah has commanded. But when it comes to knowledge of Allah, then there is no intellect capable of understanding. We do not have the capacity to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No sight understand Allah. And that means not external sight, no basar, and no basira either. So if no, I have basira, I can understand. No, that's impossible. So limitation becomes then the very core of understanding what akal does. And Ibn Arabi puts it in the most beautiful way. He says, if for the person of akal, his mode is a journey, seeking. Seeking is akal. And seeking means that I am trying to to learn. Not that I know, but the trying to know, that's akal. So it's a journey, and it's a journey that at any given time, there is more ahead of him than anything he has already advanced. So at any given time, he becomes even increasingly more aware of the things he doesn't know. In other words, akal is a way of saying, the more I know, the more aware I am of not knowing. You can see that from this perspective, the person who has more knowledge is the person who understands how little he has. So it is for the least awareness you are of your limitedness, the more ignorant you are. You follow me? So being a path, it means continuous improvement. But at any given time, nobody can say, and now I have arrived to a position where now I understand astaghfirullah. Nobody can say that except the fool. So the very notion of akal is then seeking knowledge of Allah, and in the seeking, the recognition of that limitation. Now, in comparison to the people of Fikr, when they try to understand Allah, when they try to create theology, I don't know how many times I have said that Islam doesn't have theology. Islam is anti-theology. It is impossible to create theology. Theology is precisely the first child of philosophy. The philosophy, that fashion of thinking, that it was originated with the Greeks, with the ancient Greeks, particularly starting with Plato, because Socrates didn't write, Plato, and particularly with Aristotle, who transforms the meaning of truth into a mechanism of correspondence. Truth unveiled, hidden behind veils, and the very notion of unveiling and the very notion of knowledge, it becomes now trapped and located within the discourse, within the words, within logos. Now it's a practical way of looking at life, that you can actually define what is true of any situation, if you are capable of proving whatever it is that is taking place in a manner that the statement corresponds to what is perceived. Now it sounds like, so what's the big deal? Well, that's the difference between Western civilization and the mess it got itself in, and knowledge of Allah. Even Martin Heidegger, I have explained to you many times, he is the first one in the academic world of the West to pointing out that there is a mistake here. There is a departure. That the thinking that is originated by the Greeks is actually not thinking. Is what he called a fashion of thinking. It's just a kind of a practical way of encountering the notion of thinking, because as he says, a thinking that cannot think the truth cannot be called thinking. And precisely, logos, the statement, the words, cannot define the truth. When they do, they create shirk. And that is theology. So can we say the Islamic theology? No, categorically not, just like in the same way that you cannot say Islamic communism or Islamic atheism. They are contradictory terms. You cannot speak in those terms. When it comes to knowledge of Allah, the Muslims have spoken about Marifatullah, and Marifa represents a different process altogether. You cannot access knowledge of Allah by means of sentences and definitions. Even more clearly so, if you do think that you have succeeded in defining Allah with words, well, that is the proof of shirk. Allah is incomparable. In the eyes of modern people, that means, therefore, this is a mystery and you cannot speak about it. Because clearly, this is the world of irrationality. No, because rationality and irrationality, they are not opposites. There are two different conditions within the same semantic field. It's reason. It's within the world of reason. And you can also say everything is irrational, and you can say everything is rational as long as it has words. That leads to modern people to say there are several truths, and all the mess that follows. There is indeed another way of thinking, which is by means of the heart, which, as we have already spoken, it is based on the recognition of the limitation of its own capacity. Recognition of your incapacity, in the words of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, is itself the idrak. The idrak consists on precisely recognition, the idrak, the limitation of the idrak. So I know that I don't know. That's fundamentally so. Now there is a little bit more than that. Is another aspect of the matter is that, as Shaykh Ibn al-Arabi explains, this comes from the heart. Akal, heart, Basirah. You can see the triangle. Rumi will say, well, there is another triangle, which is mind, chalaki, or you can translate it as Fikr, or you can translate it as rational thinking, like in the sense of seeking proofs or seeking reasoning. To be more precise, it will be like the word used in the Persian is chalaki, and probably the best word for it is nadir or nadar. Nazir. So Fikr and Nazir, they represent another type of thinking, the nature of which is different than the one of the heart. So you have heart, Basira, Akal, and here you have mind, Nazir, instead of Basira, opinion. You have an opinion. So I have an opinion about this and I have an opinion about that, but you cannot call it truth. And it's definitely not in the same realm as Basira. So an insight onto the matter in the terms of an opinion is not the same as Basira. Now, if we mixed rational thinking, including Fikr and Nazir, if you mix it with Akal and you say these are the same thing equals intellect, then the rest of the layer, it becomes a complete incomprehensible level. So some people say, for example, that the heart is just an extension of the mind. Okay. I don't know what they think about heart. Some people even say there are neurons in the heart, so therefore it's like part of the same neurological system as the brain. And there may be some biology in this, but it's not what is spoken of when we say the word Basira. And the heart is not the physical heart, is often spoken as the chest, okay, the breast, the upper part of the body. The breathing, sometimes the upper part of the body, exactly. So the distinction is necessary because otherwise everything becomes incomprehensible. In this distinction between these two several fields, there is something of great importance in order to understand what it is that we do when we say Takbir and when we call the Adhan. Because, as I started in the beginning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says to Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, say, I call to Allah with Basirah. So what it is that is not intellect. Now, imagine we speak about something more tangible, like, for example, the Sharia, and you want to call the people about the Sharia. Now, you can do it with reason, and you can do it with Basirah. And Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, no, I call the people to Allah with Basirah. It means the Sharia itself is not a rational proof of anything. It is an invocation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This takes us to a fundamental idea, that the Sharia is not there for the sake of itself, but it doesn't stand autonomous and separated from knowledge of Allah, but is part of knowledge of Allah, since the ultimate purpose of the Sharia is to bring you closer to Allah. I hope you understand this, because this is central. When I was minting gold coins with the people in London, I noticed that the people got overexcited. Once we started minting and the coins were circulating and we were paying zakat with the gold coins, some people said, now this is the proof that the gold coin is better than paper money. And indeed it was, because paper money is just a joke. Okay, is the very proof of the ghafla of the people of today is the use of paper money. There is no way on earth that you can discuss anything to do with knowledge of Allah or Basira or anything of the kind when you normalize the use of paper money. It is completely impossible to underline any discourse related to Marifa, while at the same time you normalize the use of fiat money, which is the very proof of the ghafla, the being completely absurdly enslaved by a system they don't even understand. You cannot. So, like, for example, here in Turkey, you cannot possibly try to say, no, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who loves me by prayers and this and the other, without at the same time and comprehensively explaining to the people that therefore you have to abandon what Allah has made forbidden, which is in this system of usury embedded in the legal system that robs you every second. You cannot separate one thing from the other. And neither it is the reason why we want to promote what is sunnah and what is correct, which is to bring money back, because paper money is not money. That's not money. It's only a stamp in your forehead saying, I am in a complete state of ghafla. I don't understand anything. And if you want to normalize this thing, well, it is incompatible. Incompatible as in impossible to put together with Marifatullah. Some people don't like it, obviously, but this is a fact. This is a foundational part of everything Ibn al-Arabi is teaching. The Sharia, therefore, has only meaning in as much as it brings you closer to Allah. So in Malaysia, I used to tell them, don't say dinar, 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 dinar. Say Allah, 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 Allah. Do dhikr of Allah. The dinar will take care of it by itself. Either what we are proving with this is that to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the path to success. And what they were telling us that is impossible, that it can never be done, that you will descend into chaos if you introduce the gold currency. We have proven them that they are absolutely, completely wrong. Completely wrong. And of course there is no chaos, but order is what comes in. And that is knowledge. Okay, so if the Sharia has only meaning in as much as brings you closer to Allah, that is the purpose of the Sharia. So it is to give the Adhan. The Adhan is to bring you closer to Allah. And what the Mu'adhin is transmitting, it touches the heart of the people. Every time you speak with someone, as I am speaking to you, I am passing on to you something of my own state. And so are you every time you speak with somebody else. Whether the conversation is about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you explain to them the benefits of the prayer, or you are speaking about any other subject, you are transmitting your state to the people who are listening to you. This is foundational. Now, what is this other thing that you are transmitting to the other person? Because the words are the same. You can say the same things with different intention. Well, all that field that we spoke when we refer to the Maqam, you transform, you pass on your state to other person, your Maqam. At the very heart of this is the very notion of Basirah. What you see, what you perceive is transmitted beyond the words. And so it is that when you say, you call upon Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, to do it with Basirah is not the same thing as doing it without. Even if everything it is meant in the transmission is exactly word by word and with the perfect pronunciation of the Arabic. Even with all those elements, if the Basirah is removed from that equation, it's deficient. It doesn't mean there will be zero benefit into the matter, but it's deficient. For what is meant, what gives meaning to the sentence is not just the phonemes and the sounds, and not even the obligation. The fact that you have to do it because it has been commanded, but the notion that is embedded in the expression, I call to Allah with Basirah, which is part of the Quran. So the word Basirah here, it takes us into the world of awareness, of taqwa, of having a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the nature of which is not logical. He tells me, so therefore I obey, that's good. But there is a difference between I hear, therefore I obey with knowledge, and I hear, I obey without knowledge. The difference is completely. You can do the prayer with knowledge and without knowledge, and it's not the same. You can, if you remove taqwa from that equation, the movements, the things that you are doing could be the same. I'm not talking about bad things versus good things. I'm talking about good things. You can do charity with taqwa or without taqwa, different. You can do something as beautiful as minting gold coins with knowledge, without knowledge, different. You can pray, you can fast with knowledge, without knowledge, big difference. So what is this other thing? what is this other thing that we are discussing here, without which every action seems to be deficient? Well, that is in the case of at this very instant. We will discuss many aspects of the matter, but it can all be encompassed with the notion of Basirah. It's a different type of knowledge that originates in the heart, and it is a path not of therefore I have knowledge of everything, but it's a path, it's the seeking of the path that increases you in dependence on Allah, on taqwa of Allah, on trust in Allah, all the different aspects of which we speak constantly when we refer to tasawwuf. You can't eliminate that part. Those who negate this part, and there is even Arabi distinguishes with people who just don't do it because they don't know. These are jahal, ignorance. So they don't know. So these poor things, they don't know. That's it. They do repeat, they copy, and there is a judgment for that. And there are the people who negate it, and this is a ghafla. So knowing, and they still reject it. To him, when you examine his understanding of ghafla, he says these are people who simply, they are ignorant also. But there is something worse about them, because they are ignorant without any desire. So when somebody tells them, but you need Allah, they dismiss it. They dismiss it, and they negate the inner realities simply because they are fully engaged into the practical matters, as they say, and they see the Sufis as for wasting time. For example, when it comes to the implementation of the Sharia, as I said, there are people, when we are speaking here in Turkey, we're speaking with very prominent intellectuals of the country in order to establish the conditions in order to be able to mint dinar and dirham here in Turkey, which is one of our aims. When we discuss with them, it is often the case, and it happened to us just only a week ago, that we were discussing with perhaps the most prominent defender of the gold currency in Turkey. Very well-known intellectual. Apart from the fact he had no idea what is the gold dinar, which is our first level of shock, he was only interested in the part of that demonstrate causation and proof of the gold dinar in relation to what he hypothetically had thought were the problems. In other words, he was completely deprived of any notion of Allah. In fact, but when I tried to mention the name of Allah into the picture, he reacted with laughter. And then you realize, what can you do? And these are the people who spoke in favor of the gold dinar. The other people, they say the Turkish lira is not amazing. These are the best, but deprived of any knowledge of the relevance of seeking knowledge of Allah, which is the essence of Basirah. So to call upon Allah with Basirah is not just adding pepper to the soup. Is the soup itself. Is that something you cannot do without. Something that you cannot be separated from, because it's intrinsic to the message. Now, when you call upon the people to Allah, you need Basirah. And this is what I take from this. The adhan naturally, because I'm saying Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. I'm calling upon the people to Allah. And I have to do it with Basirah. And then I said, and what is this Basirah then? You know? And then I was just thinking, and a story I already told you. This is my second Ramadan in Morocco, and the Musdub that it was walking through the streets of the market of Fez, the old city of Fez, shouting almost desperately, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Desperately. Crying out himself. With a mixture of sobriety outwardly, but inwardly joyful. I mean, bursting. And how do I know that? Because I followed him. Because I took his arm and I said to my companion at the time, of the Takbir, I said to him, please, I will see you in the mosque. I'm going to go with this man. And I took his arm and I started shouting with him. And then I felt it. And as we arrived, he just looked at me. And he gave me a smile. The first time I took him, I don't even think he noticed I took his arm. He was in a trance. But as we arrived to the mosque, he looked at me and he saw that I was holding him. He gave me the smile and the laugh of the century. And in that smile, he transmitted on me the most absolute joy that you can ever feel. That we are witnesses. He was so happy. I couldn't tell what was in his mind. But I felt he was saying, there is another mad person here. Acknowledging that I'm not alone. Now, I will call that vision. What he transmitted, independent of whether the people who are listening to him could understand or not. But he transmitted indeed, and I'm the witness of that. May Allah bless this man, because it did change me. I couldn't say the Shahada anymore in the same way. And the Adhan became now sealed into my heart, because I couldn't say it any other way except that way that he taught me. And that is Basirah. Unaccountable for. It's not rational. It contains an element of madness, but not irrationality. To abandon rationality doesn't mean irrationality. It means I don't care about that field of things. I proclaim with all my heart as a witness that indeed Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, as I burst inwardly. Drunkenness. Holding on my tears. Simply in the act of calling to Allah, to the people. Nothing could be more beautiful than that. I'm telling you this. And this is the Adhan. So to be able to call with Basirah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the greatest of all the joys that exist in this world. And you can say, no, but there is something else. I doubt it. To call to Allah with Basirah is not intellect. It's knowledge itself. It's Marifah. And remember that Marifah is not... You become aware, to become truthful in Marifah. It's like to succeed in taqwa. Is to recognize the limitations of taqwa. Is to recognize the limitations of Basirah. Is to recognize the journey. That is, to have taqwa is to realize you don't have taqwa. And here it is the Adhan of Ankara. I don't know whether you can hear it. Unfortunately, it's a tape. And I leave you with this thought, that to give the Adhan is with Basirah. And that is from that door, when we cross this door, now even Al-Arabi is going to say, and what is the meaning of this? And that will be next week, inshallah, for indeed this man is extraordinary. A simple sentence that can change a life. If you are ready to go into this roller coaster. If you allow it to happen to you, you will understand. بسر وبركاته بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم